Okay, you ready? Okay, we'll start. I'm going to introduce myself, and Judd will introduce himself. I'm Matt Ubel. I'm from Wheaton. Lived there pretty much my whole life. Me and my family farm there, and my wife and I have a business. We have a mobile coffee trailer that goes around the county. I'm a Kansas Farmers Union Vice President. I'm pretty active in state government and some local government on some things with them. I've been active with them for about 15 years now. So I decided that I wanted to run for commissioner this spring, so that's what I'm doing. So please ask any questions you have, and I'll try to answer them the best I can.
I'm Judd McCormick, so I'm running for the 4th District, which is just a St. George Township. I've lived in the area for about 15 years. My wife and I moved to Manhattan in 2001, and then we moved to St. George in 2011. We've been heavily involved in the community since we moved there. About 5 years ago, I decided to get involved in politics for some reason. Ran for city council, accidentally won. So that kind of just took off from there, and then we've had a lot of big projects that we've done down there. St. George has been an interesting history. Several years ago, a lot of controversy, not sure if we can make payroll, very aging infrastructure, and so we've had to work pretty hard basically about the last 10 years on things, and I've only been a part of it for about the last 5. And then from that, I was asked to be on the Pot County Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'm on my 3rd year of that, and actually in June just got re-nominated and won by a vote of 8-1 to be the chair again. I voted against myself, but again, didn't win that either. So 2 years ago, I ran for commissioner. One of the reasons I ran 2 years ago is because I was already involved in a lot of county things. I was going to a lot of KDOT meetings, East Manhattan Project, 24 studies, stuff like that. I didn't really see a lot of other representation from our town as far as citizens or any other people part of the council. And at that point in time, there was kind of a transition from 3 to 5 members as well. So at that point in time, Dee McKee was our representative, and she was usually there at the meetings, but I felt like we were just kind of underrepresented in the St. George Township. So I continued to go to more and more of those, and then that just kind of spurred more interest in the county, and so I continue to do all these things at the county level, even though my role isn't really for that, but it's mostly to be informed and to bring that information back to city council, so if we had any input, we could do that. I currently work for the Kansas Board of Regents. They're in charge of the state universities in Topeka. I do data and logistics for them. I'm in charge of online web portals, so my background is really in data and statistics, and I usually try to do as much of that when I evaluate things. Try to avoid emotional decisions as much as I can. Sometimes it's hard not to get emotionally invested, but I really like to go with facts and data as much as I possibly can. I'm running this time. Again, I ran 2 years ago. Gary won. He was our current commissioner. It was my first taste of actually running for anything at this level. I've been asked multiple times last couple of years if I was going to run again. I was kind of split on it, but people kept encouraging me to run because they think I have good ideas and I bring logical thinking and decision making to the table, and so that's what kind of encouraged me to just go ahead and run again this time and see what happens. So that's why I'm here.
Good.
I'm good. How about you?
Okay, well, I guess pretty small group here, so just ask any questions you have, and if you'd like to know more about us, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I guess the thing I should point out, so we're kind of in different situations. So I'm running in the primary against Gary, the Republican primary, which will be on August 4th. You will be in the general election come November, so things are a little bit different between us, so my fate will be decided in the next few weeks. You still have a long ways to go of all this fun.
Long ways to go.
So that's a little bit different. I don't know if anybody knows, but today Pottawatomie County Times just came out with candidate profiles that if feature me and Gary and the two candidates that are running for the Kansas House as well. So if you haven't had a chance to go see some of that, it's pretty short. It's about 500 words, I think, is what I was given.
Yeah, I think that's what they were very close. I think they printed like 250. The rest is online if you buy a subscription.
So I might have a little bit of a background. This gentleman here has been doing a good job of covering planning and zoning lately, so I feel like I've been in the paper quite a bit. Positive or negative for some people, it kind of depends, I guess, on that, but working on several things at planning. So,
Any questions?
What would you guys say the biggest challenges are facing the county at this point, and what would you do to fix it or address it, I guess?
I'll go first on that
Okay.
one. Probably the biggest challenge right now that I see, the county's growing very fast, which can be a challenge, and keeping the numbers straight as we grow and keeping things under control would be a challenge. I think there's a challenge also of you've got a population moving in and you've got a rural community trying to preserve their heritage, and that can be a challenge to keep you balanced and keep everybody happy and where they want to be. We've experienced that a lot in District 5 in the last 5 or 6 years. Trying to preserve our rural heritage and way of life as the county grows can be challenging at times. So that's kind of what got me active in the local side of government and motivated me. So.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges that we're aware of, obviously, all the talk of the data center and trying to preserve rural communities and balancing economic growth. I think one of the things that I've talked about that I'd like to see is we have certain areas along several of our highways, like Highway 24, that I think could be used for more commercial and industrial zoning that would kind of keep those businesses zoning along the highways, whether it's 99, 24, whatever it may be. And particularly like in the St. George area, because in my opinion, it's just far enough out away from Manhattan that it's more decision-making within just Pot County itself without decision-making between a conglomerate of Pot County commissioners and Manhattan City Council. So trying to balance that economic growth and maintaining, the rural parts of the county is a challenge. Something else that's come up a lot just from my time on planning and zoning has been the quarter rule that we have here in the county, which is arguably the most confusing thing to try to explain and understand. And the concept behind it is basically to not really allow overdevelopment in one particular section in rural areas and to keep housing basically closer to paved roads in basically groups and try to keep it in certain areas. And so we've done a lot of talk the last couple of years in planning and zoning about potential changes to the quarter rule. And there's a lot of different opinions on that, whether it should be countywide or whether it should be below a certain area like Elmsley Road, for example. Some of the things that we've talked about recently and what I'm kind of pushing for isn't so much about opening the quarter rule up everywhere, but we have pockets of housing throughout the county that got kind of caught up in a quarter rule. There's already 4 or 5 houses and there's lots, but you can't do any more on those lots because the way the quarter rule is set up or the way the sections are broken up. And so I'm kind of more interested in kind of infilling some of those areas and not really touching the quarter rule for now. So that kind of helps the more rural areas and keeps development where we want it. But then we can kind of infill some of those areas that kind of got caught up when that quarter rule came in. Because we do have lots that would be good for housing, but right now we just can't do it with that rule in place without making a bunch of changes to it. So that's one of the things we were working on at the end of last year. And then conversation of the data center came up. And so pretty much the bulk of this year has been talking about regulations for that data center, and the quarter rule has kind of been put on the back burner. But I don't want to lose sight of that because the data center isn't the only thing that we need to focus on in the county. There are plenty of other things. That is the biggest thing, and it has definitely taken the most time this year. But I don't want to lose sight of other things like that. And I think evaluating that quarter rule, looking at strategic placement of commercial and industrial for economic growth, is still things that we want to continue to look at in the county as well.
And I might add to that with that quarter rule, we've got some land in District 5 that developers are playing that quarter rule, to its max, and we're ending up with these pockets of houses out here. And I think if like Judd's talking, we address that quarter rule, we might, take a little there to give a little more down there, and kind of come up with a nice balance between the two. Maybe it's one per quarter instead of one per quarter or something like that, to kind of reduce the housing population in the northern part and keep our ag land more intact, and then put the development where it needs to be. So.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend probably all night just talking on one subject, especially that. That's always been the magic question: is what should the number of houses be in the quarter rule? Why was it set at what it was at? It kind of came in, and then my understanding is it kind of went away for a couple of years, and then it kind of came back. So it was kind of back and forth, and in that time frame, there was some development that happened that it's like, okay, it's gone, and then it's back, and then the development kind of got caught up in it. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And the other thing about that is that part of our strategic plan for the county is really to try to get more housing development back into municipalities. So like, for example, I live in St. George, and we have several areas in St. George. It's great for building houses. We have our own issues right now why we're not able to do that, which we're working on. But if you drive through there, and if you're around there, you realize all the pockets of housing that have developed around St. George are just outside, for the most part, of kind of the territorial boundary that St. George has a say in. And so we're kind of landlocked now in St. George with everything around us. So the only thing to do is either build in St. George or continue having that pocket move forward or north up Flush Road, which is a concern of mine because Flush Road isn't equipped to handle the kind of development I think that will be coming north along it. And so it was a concern of mine 2 years ago. It continues to be a concern of mine, especially as the school continues to grow. It's in a different conference. The schools that are in that conference are larger, so now we have more visitors coming to Rock Creek that's going down Flush Road, not just from the south, but from the north as well. You got Marysville and Concordia and Clay Center that would be coming down. So I'm really concerned about the safety on that road because the median age on that road, I don't want to guess, but I'm sure it's pretty young. And so I would like to see us try to do what we can for safety on that road before we're forced to do something because of a tragic accident.
And Judd mentioned just the strategic plan for the county, and part of that's our UDR. And I feel like we need to get back to that UDR and follow it. It seems like we've kind of used it as we'll look into it this time, but we're not going to follow it this time. I think we need to take that UDR more seriously and follow it. And maybe we need to make some changes to it and address some things, but that's something I would like to do is follow the UDR and what it's telling us to do. So.
And the UDR is a Unified Development Regulations, which is basically our guidebook or rule book for all of our development, rezoning, zoning regulations, and stuff like that. So when you hear us talking about developing data center regulations, it's really the regulations that would go into that UDR that we don't currently have in place. I know it's a lot. There's a lot going on. We're probably just scratching the surface of what's going on, but.
Any other questions?
Is there really any hope of like widening paved shoulders on Flush Road in the future? We don't drive regularly from here to Manhattan to go to work or anything, but the times when we've gone into Manhattan in the morning during school year, it's amazing how many vehicles are backed up from Rock Creek to I-24. And I know I see posts on reckless driving on the road, especially up River Hill and stuff. But I think not just Flush Road, but then with the development of the Highway 24 corridor, our county commissioners starting to look at access at other points along 24 that would be limited or further through another
Yeah, well, I'll start with that since that's kind of down in District 4. So I've talked to a couple individuals, the engineer, his name is so I actually talked to him a couple of weeks ago when Wamego was doing their 24 study over there. I know there's going to be issues on Flush as far as widening because there's some narrow bridges, there's just some sharp drop-offs, and there's some homes that are pretty close to the road itself. So I know it's going to be a challenge to do in different areas, and I know the cost involved in trying to do the whole road in one shot is probably astronomical because Terry knows, I'm sure you know, I certainly know, the cost of road construction has probably gone up 3 times quicker than the actual inflation rate. So I know with doing stuff in St. George 6-7 years ago, prior to COVID, you could do basically about a square foot or a linear foot of roadway with curb and gutter for about $1,000. So you could basically do about 250 feet for $250,000. Now you can get about half that distance in it. So the costs are just going up really, really fast before anything can get done. And so that's always going to be an issue when that's a factor. I often wonder if it might be easier to do something similar to what they did with Highway 99, where you actually just look at trying to build a new road as opposed to just widening the existing road, because it may be just as cost effective to try to build a new section of road somewhere else, because there is a lot of curves in it. And if you kind of look at a map, you're still going to have a couple major bridges you're going to have to put in there no matter how you do it when you're coming up from St. George. But by the time the road curves around, really when you kind of come up north of St. George and you just go straight, you almost come right back into Flush. And so there might be other approaches you can look at, but the cost is certainly going to be a factor. So I think what the commissioners have done, especially with Kirtner Hill, is they try to find those high focus areas and do what they can, which making safety in certain spots. I think I would like to see a little bit more done with that. As far as more entry points into 24, that I really can't give you an answer. I've heard more about discussions about doing things like along Elm Slough and several others to kind of alleviate traffic maybe off of 24 and have another kind of east-west corridor for local traffic. I would assume that there's ideas for that to kind of come back in at certain points. Where that is, I'm not really sure. Hopkins Creek's pretty narrow. And by that time, you're getting over, into Lake Elbow and Excel Road, which already is going to have a stoplight going in. So, you're already going to have, 7-8 stoplights between St. George and the mall now. We joke a lot of times it's almost easier to go to Home Depot in Topeka than it is to go to Home Depot in Manhattan time-wise, because we go through less stoplights and the traffic flow is better. So
Yeah. Flush Road is that is a challenge. I think the commissioners have done a good job at identifying the spots that need fixed first and getting them addressed. And I think Kirtner Hill was a big one. Some of it, though, we'll be waiting on the state and see what their answer is when it comes to the 24 Flush Road intersection. That's probably the most dangerous part of the whole road. Hopefully we find a solution to that. So.
Yeah, if you're not familiar, there is a big Highway 24 study going on right now. I believe goes from Airport Road, Wamego, basically to the turnoff to Riley. And as far as in that area, I would say the Flush 24 intersection you're right, is probably one of the more dangerous intersections. I know there are some other intersections along 24 between Wamego and Silver Lake that are also cause for concerns and issues. And I went to a meeting a few years ago where they were talking about the average speed that they were catching on those roads. And the max speeds I was hearing was crazy, because generally the state, when they set a speed for the road, is they do, I think it's a 3/4 average of a traffic study of what cars are actually driving. Well, they were picking up cars doing over 120 miles an hour on 24 between St. Mary's and Bellevue. And I can only imagine what they're getting up to on the 4-lane pieces. But it was shocking how fast cars will go. And I'm sure this is probably happening at middle of the night when they don't think anybody's around. But I've always talked about for Flush Road, to me, I think when I talk to KDOT and we do these local area consult meetings about every, I think it's 2 or 3 years. I've been to 2 of them since I've been on city council. And they kind of look at different sections of the state and they break you up into rooms and they talk about these areas and then they have everybody in a room kind of talk about and vote on what they think is most important. Well, when you're one person from St. George in a room with 20 people from Kansas City with 30 issues in Kansas City and 1 issue in our county, it's really hard to get your voice across. But we have done a real good job, and that includes everybody. I mean, there's members of, Potawatomi County bridge crews and road crews, and Tim Eisenbarth and Nathan, they go to those meetings as well. And the last 2 years, there's 4 rooms in each of those, and 7 of the 8 rooms the last 2 years in our rooms basically made Flush the #1 issue. So we were able to get that point across. And to me, you can either go the very expensive route, you can go a middle of the road route, or you can go a very, very cheap route. And the most expensive route is a diamond exchange. You get the bridge over 24 and you've got the exit ramps. And all that would make sense if we could ever convince KDOT to maybe do a second entrance into Manhattan where that would be the off point. KDOT's not in the business of expanding highways right now. I mean, they're experiencing, exactly what I was talking about. The cost of rebuilding roads is extremely high right now. And so then your second option, which I always told we couldn't do, was a roundabout. Well, you can't do a roundabout with 4 lanes at that speed. Well, then they go and they put 2 in north of Manhattan. That basically, to me, wipes out that argument. The cheapest, lower the speed to 55 and patrol it. I think that's the biggest thing I see is that there's just not enough people that break their crews that goes through there. And a couple times a day, the windows and the gaps to get through there are getting smaller and harder for younger drivers to get through. And I'm just worried that we'll just move the issues to like Blackjack and Blue Run Road and some other places. And then all of a sudden we have 3 intersections that are a problem instead of just 1. So, sorry, I talked a lot about that. That's kind of a big deal for me is Flush at 24. So, we have a couple teenage girls back in 2015 that was at an accident at Blackjack because they were avoiding Flush. And that was when they were kind of condensing Flush and doing some other things. So, we've known several people that have been in accidents there. So that's one of those things that's more of an emotional decision I think about, but I'd like to see more data on it. But it certainly seems to be one of the more dangerous intersections in that stretch of road that I think should be addressed. Thank you for your question. Is that 20 minutes? How long did that? Jeez.
Any other questions?
Flock cameras. Have you guys discussed that at all? I know Wamego started getting some in, and
So I had a discussion with our sheriff the other day about flock cameras, so I guess I'll lead on this one.
Yeah.
So I kind of asked him about it, what's his stance on flock cameras. And yeah, we do have a few flock cameras in the county, but none of them have facial recognition or anything like that to them. They're basically no more than a traffic camera. And his, with sheriff's change from, but his intentions are that's all they'll ever be. I trust our sheriff. And if that's how they're using them, I'm okay with it. But if we get to like some other counties that are, they've got the facial recognition and they're reading tags constantly and that, you're getting into a gray area where you're invading people's rights. So, because police are not supposed to be running tags just to be running tags. So I don't feel that this flock camera should be doing the same thing. So
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's like the idea behind is the law tags as they go by for everybody. That way they can actually not even distracting people.
Correct.
I'm not sure if that's how it is in the county.
And I can't speak. I can't remember what he said about it, but I don't think it's logging tags. And maybe it's logging tags, but they don't look into it unless there's a complaint or hey, we're looking for a silver vehicle, and then they find silver vehicles on the. But as far as the high-end flock cameras, our county does not have that. and it says there's no intention of that. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I mean, I trust our sheriffs. So.
My turn? Oh.
Yeah, great. Need a box?
No.
Okay.
No. The chief of police in Wamego used to be the chief of police in St. George. Great guy, did a fantastic job for us. I could not compliment him enough in what he did for St. George. The one thing we did disagree on was flock cameras. He wanted to bring flock cameras into St. George. Again, I was only one vote on the council, but I managed to convince the rest of them that I thought it was a bad idea. It seemed like as soon as he went to Wamego, he was able to get access to flock cameras. I am not a big fan of flock cameras. I also have talked to Doug and actually some deputies quite a bit about it. The problem I have with flock cameras is that flock cameras are like our phone, and the software that comes with it and what you think you have when you first get it isn't what it's on it right now. So the fact that they can go look up a silver car tells me that it's not just a license plate reader. It's got auto fingerprint. They can find any car, dent, scratch, bumper sticker. The other problem with it is that we as a county can do everything by the books and do it right. But that doesn't change the fact that anybody else can actually look at our county as well. So if somebody wants to start tracking a car from somewhere else, they'll track it through our county, whether we're doing that or not. So we could do everything right here. But by putting those up, we basically allow any other agency, any other county, anybody else to basically do things not by the book. And that's the concern I have. I have less of a concern of the Pot County Sheriff's Department doing nefarious things with it. But the fact that they're here means that anybody else can do nefarious things with it because they can have that same access. So, not a fan. That's also why data centers are being built, so they can store all this information, so they can track all this information, log all this information, and make it readily available to anybody. And you're right. They may not have facial recognition now in our county, but they will. They'll have facial recognition. Everybody's face will be logged. You'll have a full profile. The Condor cameras that are coming, the next wave, are even more invasive. So I just don't think, I think that the premise behind it was a great idea. I think how it can be used and abused, there's not enough safeguards in place for civilians for it right now. And that's the biggest concern is that, and not only that, coming right behind Flock's another agency called, I think it's Axon, AXON, which is basically the same thing. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Any other questions?
What about transparency? And then, are you gonna go off your gut feeling if you guys get in there, or are you gonna go off of constituents?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go off of constituents. I'm lucky enough to where my district is very small and condensed, so it's very easy for me to kind of go around to constituents and kind of get feedback from them. I do that already within the city. There's people in the city that doesn't particularly care that much for me, and I get it. I mean, in the position I'm in, you're going to make decisions that's going to upset people, but whenever I try to make a decision, I try to go with as much feedback as I can from the people that are around me and try to use as much time as I can. The problem that you run into, though, sometimes is you don't have days, weeks, months to research or evaluate something, and so you kind of got to go with what you think your constituents want to go with if you have to make a decision in a very short amount of time. I think there's some things that I have a better feel for than others, and there's some things that I'm reluctant to make a decision, and I would like to put a survey out or do something to get some feedback. But again, it's a little easier for me because it's a very small, condensed district, and it's really easy to kind of get around to neighborhoods and people much easier and much quicker for me. District 5 is probably a bit different story.
It's a little bigger. But I'm a big advocate for transparency. I think that's an area that our county could work on. One thing I would like to see is that our commission meetings are YouTube live. or something of that form. That way, people working in town that don't have the time to come to an 8:30 in the morning meeting, commission meeting, can come home from work and watch and see what happened in their county during the day. Too many times what we have is right now is Zoom, and you have to listen to the Zoom call live. There's no recording you can go back and listen to. And if there's a pressing issue and they talk about it initially on this date, the next week they'll approve the minutes from the week before and then release that Zoom call and then they'll post it on the internet so you can listen to it. But by then they will have acted on whatever they were talking about. So it's too late for you to ever have your input on something. So that's kind of a big priority for me. I'd like to see that the commission meetings were some sort of live meeting that can be listened to right away. And then, yes, transparency is key, and I would vote my constituents. I like to talk to people, so I'm going to be talking to people all over the county, especially on pressing issues, and get their input on it. That's something I did when I was production manager down at Dymax. The people on the floor probably led the company more than I did because they knew more about what we were working on than I did. And so getting their input and making changes worked for the better. And operating that business that way took that business from an $8 million company to a $12 million company in 18 months. And so I feel like having people involved as you make decisions is very important.
Yeah, if we could get that, then the planning meetings can be YouTubed as well, which is nice. I mean, I think we would have more involvement across everybody in the county if that was in place. So I agree. That's a great point you make, Matt. I'm often concerned by the lack of interest sometimes. And so maybe making it more accessible would increase that interest amongst people across the county. We run into the same issue in St. George. Our meetings are not televised, not on YouTube. We're going to try it in August. We'll see how well our new OWL camera works. Pointing in 8 different directions, but that's something we've been trying to get to as well, is to make sure that those meetings are up where people can just tune in instead of trying to get out and come down to our meetings. So it's a fantastic idea.
And there's several cities around the county that their city meetings are YouTube live, and it's real nice to be able to just watch them, when you have the time to. So keep up to date on them.
Should call my friends at Backroads Broadcasting and see what they got.
That's a sales pitch, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's the only local St. George we got.
But any other questions?
What has been the hurdle to get St. George's meetings recorded and posted?
Yeah, so probably the biggest hurdle is access to the room sometimes is kind of sketchy. So we do all of our meetings at the Baptist church there in town. Sometimes we have the main room, sometimes we do it off to the side room. And then basically I think right before I came on, we had some camera systems they tried, and we don't have a lot of tech savvy people to get it up and going. I think once it's set up, we'll be fine. So we got a different OWL camera. And if you're not familiar with the OWL cameras, it's one. So we kind of sit in a U shape, very similar to our planning meetings, and we can set that right in the middle. So when somebody talks, the camera can focus on whoever is talking. The biggest concern was being able to hear. So I didn't want to have a camera in a room where you could see us and all you were getting was, because nobody could hear anything, nor could anybody hear anything from the crowd. So we're going to give it a shot, and we'll see, and we'll make some adjustments from there. But I think the other thing we run into is we've talked about it for a long time, and then and I'm no better, we get wrapped up in these projects, and we start focusing on these projects, and the next thing we know, the next meeting's happening the next day, and we haven't done anything else to prepare to get the camera system set up and ready to go again. So if we had a permanent space where it was just always there and all you had to do was basically turn it on and access it, which I think is probably more what we may have at the county, since the county commissioner meetings, the planning meetings are held in the same room. You know, maybe we could have a media that's set up in there and it's ready to go, and so all you have to do. For us, it's bringing it in, setting it up, taking it down, taking it with us every time we have a meeting, since we do not have a permanent space at St. George. We don't have a town hall. We rent our space where the city clerk and city treasurer is at. The only buildings we own in St. George is our PD, which is smaller than the space we're currently sitting in, and our operations building, which our fingers are crossed every time the wind blows over 50 that all the walls are still there when the next day comes. So we have our challenges, but I think sometimes we just get caught up in things, and we've let easier things that we can do kind of slip through like that. So hope to fix that.
Any other questions?
I learned about the wine.
Yeah, anybody got questions about the wine? It's very good.
Can't wait to try some.
I got one for you.
Okay.
What about this Green Valley and becoming a city? What's your thoughts there?
So I was at the first meeting. I originally didn't plan on speaking, and then after the presentations were made by Robert Busby, who was presenting in favor of the Green Valley, or at least presenting the data for the Green Valley Incorporation, the city of Manhattan then presented after that. St. George didn't have an official position, but there were things that were mentioned that I just wanted to clarify. You know, St. George, we don't really have a on-staff lawyer or on-staff engineer. It's kind of a pay-as-you-go. And so there were things that I kind of wanted to point out. Green Valley is a very different beast. You know, you got 4,000 people down there with an infrastructure that's pretty much in place already, as opposed to trying to rebuild infrastructure on something that hasn't been touched for 50, 60 years. My biggest takeaway that I tried to present in that is that there will be challenges and there'll be obstacles, but they're in a much better position for incorporation than a lot of other places are when they go to do it. From a personal standpoint, I actually like the idea of the Green Valley Incorporation for the most part, because when you talk about the East Manhattan Gateway Project, they have design plans all throughout that section of Pottawatomie County, almost basically clear out the Hopkins Creek Road, and even some designed to come out as far as Flush Road, which gets into St. George. We've been approached several times about getting on Manhattan's water or being a part of the sewer district. And most of the people live in St. George because they don't want to be a part of Manhattan, and they don't want to live in Manhattan. And I think for the people that live there, if Green Valley is to be incorporated, it would create an additional buffer between St. George and the rest of the county and the city of Manhattan, because now we have a municipality that is in place, that is right there, that can't be annexed. And if they want to try to annex all around it, then that's a different story altogether. So I think it just creates a speed bump, if you will, for the eastern expansion of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So.
And I would agree with that. Probably what I'd add to it a little bit is like, for District 5, you know, we're in the rural part of the county. What we see from up here is our county is essentially funding a small town, and a lot of our tax dollars are going down there to pay for infrastructure. This is happening while we're living with aging bridges in our area that we're taking larger and larger equipment over, and you know, we'd like to see some focus on that. I'm a little worried if Manhattan was to take more of that on, it's going to push out some of our ag business. I'm concerned about Manhattan Livestock Commission. So where if Green Valley was to take it on, I think it'd be a little friendlier. And so I'm for them becoming their own town, and like you said, creating a buffer between Manhattan and St. George.
Yeah, I think I tried to advocate in that particular meeting. You know, again, you have 3 minutes, and it's surprisingly how fast that 3 minutes goes once you stand up there and start talking. But I think one of the things I pointed out that right now you have a population of 4,000 down there, roughly, right? 4,000, 4,500, which is pretty close to the size of Wamego already. So they'll immediately become the second largest municipality in the county. So to have something of that population to be the second largest municipality that has one county commissioner and essentially one planning person represent them. So every decision that's being made there is being made by 5 county commissioners, 9 planning and zoning, and 5 city commissioners out of Manhattan. So they have really, and I tried to encourage them to the fact that if you wanted to do what you wanted to do here, you need local representation, because right now there's 2 people that are basically representing you amongst 20 different individuals. At some point in time, the other 18 of those 20 people may not care to do everything that's happening down there. You know, and it's not a threat, it's just, it's a fact of life that they just don't have the representation that I think that they could do, that they could have there, that they can make some of their own decisions as a municipality. Because right now you have to have 4 other, like you said, you have to have 4 other commissioners that don't live there approve that. Or you've got 5 commissioners in a city that are coming out, and I've heard, whether there's any validity to it or not, you know, I heard things that night about Manhattan thinking about building a park out there and then making it a special district, so then they're putting special taxes on people there for a Manhattan park. Don't know if they can do that, don't know if that's true or not, but that's concerns that they have, and I think it's legitimate that you can have these different entities that could do different things and you don't have as much representation on those decisions.
Yeah.
So, but beyond that, yeah, I think most people the rest of the county would like a buffer.
And I think while we're at it, though, we go back to the UDR. You know, how did we get to this point with Green Valley? You know, we funded a lot of infrastructure here to promote the houses, and maybe we need to look at our UDR too and see if there's a triggering point where we go, okay, you guys need to become your own town, or we're not going to fund this until you do this. Or I think there's some changes we could make there moving forward, make it kind of a learning experience.
Yeah, I think the other big concern as far as the rest of the county goes, particularly in that area, is it's going to continue developing north. So, you know, it's only so far east they can go, and they're going to start moving north. Well, you know, everybody's talked about a second entrance into Manhattan. And the idea was, geez, it'd be perfect if we could have something along, you know, Mount Zion Road, cross over the river into Marlette on the other side. Recent study shows just how expensive that is. But if you continue to develop north, the strain that you put on the 2 intersections on 24 just becomes exponentially higher and higher and higher without that relief point going somewhere else. And so I think that's something that needs to be looked at in a long-term plan, as well as how far north are we going to go before we have to knock down some hills, straighten some roads, and get another paved road over to like the Barnes Road area and cross at Rocky Ford, because that doesn't require approval from KDOT or Manhattan or Riley County, because it's all on the Pot County side. And that's your best bet for a second entrance, in my opinion, to get in there, because it's the only one that can be decided on this side. Might help alleviate 24, but again, it's a lot of road, it's an expensive project, so.
Any other questions?
I'll give you the tough one, take it or no. What sets you apart from the candidate that you're running against?
I was going to say about 5 miles. About 5 miles.
I think the thing that sets me apart from Gary, again, it's good or bad. I have a tendency to be very defensive and passionate about particular projects, and will defend people. I obviously speak too much when given the opportunity to talk, but I usually try to have a position on everything that comes my way. I want my yeses to mean yes and my no's to mean no, and I don't want to be kind of wishy-washy or neutral on any particular thing. If I'm against something, I want to basically have some very clearly defined reasons why I'm against it. It's not just because I don't want it, but here's what I think is the potential problems that can come along with it. I don't really interact with Gary a whole lot. We get along fine. I have nothing against Gary. We've only kind of sat on the stage a few times together a couple years ago. He comes to council meetings in St. George. But I don't really know where he stands on anything until the vote happens sometimes. And I would like to know more about where he stands on things. And I think I'm pretty clear on where I stand on the things that have come up. Again, I think you can look at our profiles that came out today, and I'm very, very clear on where I stand. And I just didn't get that impression from him, is that we'll see.
So yeah, we're 5 miles apart. No, like we were talking, I was talking with some department heads this week about some things, and you know, like they said, both of us are great, you know, great candidates. So they feel confident in whoever wins. I think, you know, my biggest thing is the transparency and adding to that and getting back to our processes and following them. So I feel like we've veered away from that for quite a while now. And so I want to get that more in line and follow our processes and maybe even improve upon them. I'm kind of big on that, especially being part of Farmers Union. That's a lot of what we do is policy, you know, setting policy and processes. And so I, you know, just like the other night, I took a policy change to the planning commission. You know, when we can do stuff like that and improve upon things, I think it's a great thing. So
I think having that forum to be able to do that is really important too, to get that feedback. You know, I've only been on the planning commission just under 3 years, and I feel like, at least on my time there, that we've done a good job of listening to people who've come in, even if it's non-agenda items. We let everybody talk at the beginning of the meeting about non-agenda items and to bring things forward. Because there's always something going on in the county that maybe we don't always know about. And so it's really good to have the community to be able to feel comfortable, come in and give those things. And, you know, we'll be doing that again in August when we talk about the open comments period for data center regulations, is that I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak about it. Because I know there's going to be a lot of opinions, good, bad. Mostly people that are indifferent probably won't be there. But I think it's a good idea to hear that and to take that feedback and make whatever constructive change that we can make. And it doesn't always happen. And so I think that's something that we do a pretty good job of. But yeah, I think we could be a little bit better about it at all levels, from municipality level all the way up to our state and federal levels. It just seems like our voices are getting lost more and more in today's day and age. And it's frustrating, and I feel like I have been frustrated as well the last few years, and I think that's why I continue to stay involved, is because I feel like the only way my voice is going to be heard is if I continue to scream from the top of the mountains, so to speak. And I'm happy to bring along as many people with me as I can to make sure that we're being heard at whatever level it is.
So you're not gonna unplug the microphone, right?
No.
That was
No, and you know, there's genuine concerns, I mean, about what could happen that night. I mean, everybody has seen videos online about other places that they're talking about data centers, and it's a circus. And, you know, I said at last planning meeting, and part of it was in the paper as well, is that we don't want it to be a circus. We don't want to have to shut people down. I want to genuinely hear what people have to say. It's not just a Pot County problem. Yes, it's going to be built here, but it's something that's going to be built here. If they're drawing power off of Evergy, if they're drawing water out of the aquifer, it's a problem for, I mean, Jackson County is what, 2 miles away. So it's going to be a problem for them. And so it's anybody that's part of that power grid, it's a potential issue. So we can't just lock it down to people that live here that have something to say, because it doesn't just affect people that live here. It's primarily affecting people that live here. It's going to be built here. But if it gets built here, it's going to affect a large group of people everywhere. And I think that's something to keep in mind is, you know, and it's what keeps coming up. Well, if it's not going to get built here, it's going to get built somewhere else. And some people are like, that's fine. It's fine. But I've said it multiple times. I think the biggest concern for the folks that live in your district particularly are things that we can't regulate. It takes state level involvement. We can't regulate their power. We can't regulate their water. We can't regulate the discharges. We can't regulate what may go back into the ground. That's KDHE. That's Resource Office. That is Kansas Corporation Commission. So to have everybody at state level say it should be a local decision, quite honestly, I think it's a cop-out that they don't want to say anything good or bad for it, and they're leaving it up to people like us to say whether we're for it or not, and sticking us with trying to do what we need to do. And we can't do what we want to do because we can't put all the regulations together at a local level. So it takes more than just locals. It's going to take the entire state that's involved in it. And I just don't feel like anybody right now that is running for an office at the state level wants to commit to one thing or the other. It should be a local decision. It should be a local decision. If we have good regulations, it should be good. So all the onus keeps falling on one small group of people right now in this county, and it's not just that small group of people in this county's problem to deal with. We're taking the brunt of it, and we're trying to deal with it as best we can, but it's a big issue for everybody.
So you think that the decision whether or not the data center goes in should be left to bigger Kansas rather than just local?
I'm fine with them saying it's a local problem or a local decision to make, but I think locally we need to have assurances from the state that here are regulations that we can't do, and will you do it? Because my concern is, and we've seen it happen in other places, and I don't want to say anything that may happen here, but you can look in other states, and the EPA basically has quit paying attention to discharge being dumped in creeks and rivers. Some states quit looking at certain factories and entities that are doing that. So if KDHE doesn't fully 100% have the back of the people here that are trying to regulate it, and if the Kansas Water Resource Office doesn't fully have the people's back here, we're dependent upon them because there's nothing we can do about it. And so our only concern is that if something comes in here, we have our regulations in place, they start building, and then they decide they're going to do what they want to do when it comes to power use, water use, discharge. Locally, we made a decision, but we can't control what they do. So we're dependent upon the state to back us with both regulations and whatever legal things may come our way if it turns into lawsuits because they don't want to follow regulations and they're going to do what they want to do.
So as it stands right now, data center or against it?
I oppose large and hyperscale data centers for that very reason, is I think right now it's too much of a void and complications between what local authorities can do and regulate and what states are trying to push with Senate Bill 98, incentivizing them to come here. So what they did is they opened the door to let the beast in and basically said, have fun.
Yeah, have fun, counties.
We'll worry about it later. But now it's the county's problems to deal with. So they didn't get any feedback from local authority when it came to Senate Bill 98. Now, luckily, 2 of our 3 representatives voted against it. 1 did not. 1 still supports it. But luckily for me in my district, both of our state representatives voted against Senate Bill 98. Whether they still would today, I don't know. I get the impression they still would. So, but I think that was kind of the problem with it. It's no different if let's say our county commissioner said, yeah, that's a great idea. We're going to let anybody come in and do whatever they want in the cities. They wouldn't do that. So, but that's why I feel like it happened here, and it's very frustrating.
So I've got some experience firsthand when it comes to EPA and water pollution. We had an incident in District 5 where a corporation was polluting our waters. It took us a year to get the EPA out there and identify the problem. So that concerns me. On top of that, you call the state and say, who is going to regulate the discharge of this water? They can't give me an answer. I've been sent to 4 departments and they can't give me an answer. That's very concerning to me. That's why I'm a no. I mean, they don't have their act together yet at the state level. So that there's a lot of work to be done there, and being part of Farmers Union, we're working with them on some of that too. Yeah, SB 98's not a,
Yeah.
that was a, yeah.
I mean,
So-
we've had a similar issue in St. George with KDHE. We were growing, had to drill 2 new wells. By the time we found water and got the infrastructure put in place, it's something like $1.5 million that we had to borrow money from KDHE to do. So we have a KDHE loan to have enough water to support St. George where it currently stands. Good water, I'm told it's some of the best water around, except several years after the wells were drilled, all of a sudden it developed a nitrate problem that didn't exist when the wells were drilled. It went from no parts per million nitrates to over 20 in a very, very quick time. So now we're blending our water right now to keep it under that 10 parts per million. KDHE is willing to give us a $5.5 million loan to blend with rural water and build a new tower, because a water treatment facility is over $10 million. In a town of 1,000, with half the population is under the age of 18, can't afford something like that. The biggest problem was we tried sending samples of the water to find out what kind of nitrates they were and where they came from. We did that over a year ago, KDHE. Crickets. So we had to take it and send it to a private individual lab to find out what it was, only to find out that it was chemical fertilizer in an area that doesn't really have a lot of farming. KDHE was less concerned about how it happened, but what we're doing to remediate it. And that's my problem. They won't care about how the groundwater gets contaminated, but if anybody has to use it, they will care how that water gets sold out and used after that. That's what we've experienced. And so that's why I have concerns about KDHE, EPA, Kansas Resource Office, and all those people that are in charge of the regulations that people care the most about when it comes to our land and our water here in Potawatomi County. That was kind of an angry rant, I think.
You were making me mad. Yeah, and you know, to go back to that, you know, taking a year for them to come out and find the problem for us was very frustrating. I mean, phone call after phone call after phone call. And in the meantime, the corporation put a target on other farmers' backs and cost them $20,000 each for stuff that was not their problem. And so it was very frustrating for us in our area.
And that's just one of them.
Just one of them.
Yep.
Any other questions? Mr. Thomas, would you like to give an introduction and give us your campaign spiel? And thanks for coming tonight. I'm glad to
For sure, I'm always trying to find out more about what's going on. So yeah, Robert Thomas, I'm running against Francis Hauerkamp for Kansas House Representatives District 61. So Francis would be the one that voted for SB 98 in our county and continues to support it. It'd definitely be one of the big issues, difference between me and him. I'm definitely for small government, just trying to wrangle some of that stuff in. Right now, our state's got about a $500 million a year deficit that we're running, so that's obviously not sustainable, so we need to get that wrangled in. There's all sorts of other things, but this is your guys' party, so I'm not going to take that.
No.
Good to meet you guys. If you want my card or my information, I'll for you.
Well, I think you just made an interesting point of why Senate Bill 98 happened. So a $500 million deficit that was caused because of moving from 3 to 2 different tax brackets that basically benefited one particular tax bracket extremely well and not so much the other two. So when we talk about data centers coming in here and a potential economic growth that can come off of it or tax revenue, my concern is that basically we are one piece of federal state legislation away from them saying you can no longer basically do that to data centers because it's a matter of federal national security and it's basically like federal property. So then therefore anything that could be a benefit could easily be wiped out. And with a state with that big of a shortfall, with no end in sight, a federal government whose deficit is increasing daily, every minute, I just don't see that any benefits that may come our way in 3, 4, 5 years will last very long if the deficits continue the way they are. Tax breaks were primarily in place for the type of wealth that owns and builds data centers. I can't imagine they'll want to keep paying taxes when they basically want it out of them to begin with. So that's a major concern, is that anything that could be a potential revenue may not even exist 3 or 4 years, and it's too easy for it just to disappear for us without a very, very good economic development plan in place if one was to come in.
Any other questions? No?
And this may have been answered before we came here, came over quickly, but to go back to Green Valley being its own township. So how long until, like, what would their revenue be on their city tax? And how long will it take before they have usable money from? And so do us, as the other Pot County residents, are we sort of loaning them until they can get their own money for their own road systems, things like that we would use for that? Would that affect our taxes for short term, long term, what would happen with that?
So I wouldn't be able to answer that specifically. I can only tell you what I recall from the first meeting. Actually, our current commissioner here would have a better understanding of that. And Terry, you can jump in at any point in time if I go off track on it. But my understanding is that in year one of them, that essentially, I'm going to say it wrong, for lack of a better term, they would essentially have equivalent of a tax exemption or a type loan for a certain amount that they would end up having to pay up again as the year after that first year.
A loan from Pot County?
No, it's more along the state revenue piece. So right now they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 some mill levy is just a member of the county. If they were to go into a municipality, they would actually have to raise their mill levies up to, depending on what they wanted to do as far as clerk, treasurer, city hall, policing, all that. It could go from anywhere from like 45 to 53 roughly. And so it wouldn't change our taxes for anything that they're doing there. And basically there would be a catch-up period for them to where it wouldn't hit them that first year. Then after that first year, their taxes would actually be a little bit higher until they kind of caught up after that first year.
So that the
Is that
state line would
close?
be on, and like their would be different than the rest of the county, is what you're saying?
What was that first?
Like what's the line of like within city limits is now established, so then their levies would be different than the rest of our counties for a time being, is what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the only real impact on the rest of the county, as far as what we were looking at for like St. George, is so there is a county-wide sales tax that gets distributed based off of any county sales. So, and it doesn't really matter where at in the county. So if there's a business in the county, that county sales tax comes in, and then like St. George will get a certain percent, while Wamego's percent will be bigger because it's based off of, is it population alone or valuation? So then each municipality gets a little bit of that county tax money. So each of those municipalities' tax revenue they get from the county because of the sales that are currently happening in that area would actually, part of it would go down. But the part of it for St. George that would go down was actually pretty nominal for us because of our evaluations there, and not enough for us to be of great concern that it could be made up pretty quickly for us with just one more business in our own town, quite easily. But most of the burden would fall on the folks that are actually in Green Valley that would become incorporated. So it really wouldn't change any of our property evaluations or taxes for the rest of the county.
So then my question with that would be then, so that if they're their own township in Pot County, does that open them up to Rockford School District?
No, because the county doesn't have any say in school districts. or zip codes or addresses. So the Kansas School Board would decide, and they would just probably stay in the Manhattan School District because they're already in it, because the line right now is Hopkins Creek Road. So everything east of Hopkins Creek is Rock Creek, everything west, or strike that. No, I had that right the first time. Everything west of Hopkins Creek is in Manhattan, and then it kind of zigzags up around, kind of up by the lake and the dam. School districts wouldn't change. Now, they could petition